My beloved child, your tears were never meaningless, and they were never accidental. Every night you cried without knowing why, something inside you was reacting to a truth your mind was not yet allowed to touch. The heaviness in your chest, the sudden sadness with no clear reason, the feeling that something was wrong even when everything looked fine, this was your soul remembering what your family worked so hard to erase. They smiled, they laughed, they acted normal, but behind those walls was a decision that reshaped your life without your consent. You were the only one not invited into the truth, not because you didn't deserve it, but because once you knew it, everything they built on silence would fall apart. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen. 111. Listen carefully now. Years ago, when a moment came that required courage, they chose comfort instead. A truth surfaced that could have protected you, defended you, and changed your path forever, but it would have exposed their mistakes, their fear, and their selfishness. So they buried it. They told themselves it was for your good, that you were better off not knowing, while watching you struggle with confusion, self-doubt, and pain they secretly understood but never explained. Every time you questioned yourself, they stayed quiet. Every time you blamed yourself, they looked away. The family bond you trusted was quietly rewritten into an agreement of silence, and you were the price they paid to keep their image intact. Amen. 222. Now this is where everything turns, because secrets do not disappear, they wait. The crying without end was the countdown. The truth has reached a point where it can no longer stay hidden, and someone in that family is already cracking under the weight of it. A word is about to slip, a memory is about to resurface, and a connection you never understood will suddenly make sense. When that moment arrives, you will realize your pain was not weakness, it was evidence. Evidence that you were strong enough to survive the lie, and strong enough to face what comes next. Stay here, do not turn away, because the next part will reveal who protected the secret, and why it was never meant to stay hidden this long. Amen. 333. Before the truth speaks, understand this: someone in your family has been awake at night, staring at the same ceiling you cried under, knowing that the silence is about to break. They remember the exact day the decision was made, the exact words that were spoken, and the exact promise they all agreed to keep. What you felt as distance was actually fear. What you felt as coldness was guilt. They watched you grow while carrying a secret that reshaped your destiny, and now that secret has started leaking through cracks they can no longer control. If this message is touching something deep inside you, let your presence be known in your own way, because shared truth grows stronger when it is acknowledged. Amen. 444. Now hear what was hidden: the truth was not small, and it was not harmless. It involved a moment where your name was spoken, a choice was offered, and protection was possible. But protecting you meant confronting themselves, and they were not ready for that. So they chose the easier path: let you believe the pain was yours, let you think you were the problem, let you carry the weight alone. Every tear you cried quietly confirmed their lie was working. Yet even now, deep inside, they know the story is incomplete without your voice. If you feel moved by this revelation, let the silence break in your own way, because voices awaken what fear tries to bury. Amen. 555. Stay with me here, because the most shocking part is not the secret itself, but who benefits from it staying hidden. One relationship, one bond, one image has been protected at your expense, and that truth is rising faster than anyone expected. The crying without end was the signal that the time of knowing is close. The moment you understand who stood to lose the most, everything will finally make sense. Remain here, remain aware, and if this story feels like it mirrors your own, allow your reaction to exist, because the next part will reveal what happens when the truth finally demands to be seen. Amen. 666. Now brace your heart, because the truth does not arrive loudly at first, it arrives as a quiet realization that makes your chest feel heavy. You will begin to notice how certain family members avoid specific topics, how names are skipped in conversations, how stories suddenly change when you ask one simple question. This is not coincidence. This is the shadow of a truth they memorized together, rehearsed over years, and protected through silence. The crying without end was your inner warning that something sacred had been violated long ago, and now that warning is turning into clarity. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen. 777. Understand this carefully. The secret was never about hurting you directly, it was about saving themselves from consequences. Someone feared losing respect, someone feared exposure, and someone feared that the family would fracture if the truth came out. So they chose you as the silent carrier of pain, believing you would eventually move on. But pain does not vanish when it is ignored, it transforms. It became your confusion, your overthinking, your unanswered questions. And now, the very people who once agreed to stay silent are no longer aligned, one of them is close to speaking, and that moment will change everything. Amen. 888. This is the turning point, because when the truth surfaces, you will finally understand that your tears were not weakness, they were resistance. Resistance to a lie that was never meant to live inside you. The roles will reverse. The ones who watched you cry will face the weight they avoided, and you will stand with clarity instead of confusion. Stay present, stay aware, because the next part will uncover what happens when one family member decides the secret is no longer worth protecting. Amen. 999. This is the moment silence starts trembling, because when one truth rises, it pulls every buried memory with it. The family bond you once trusted begins to feel unfamiliar, almost fragile, as if one wrong word could shatter everything. Behind calm faces, there is panic. Behind gentle voices, there is urgency. They sense that control is slipping, that the story they agreed on years ago is no longer holding. The tears you cried alone are now echoing in rooms where decisions were once made without you. This is not chaos, it is exposure. Amen. 1111. Pay attention here. Because messages like this are not heard by everyone, only by those who were meant to awaken at the right time. When truth resonates, it seeks connection, it seeks witnesses, it seeks movement. Let this revelation travel beyond silence, let it be acknowledged, let it be carried forward by those who feel it deeply. When awareness spreads, fear loses its power. Your reaction, your presence, your engagement with this truth is not random, it is part of how hidden things finally come into the light. Amen. 1212. And now understand the shift, the crying without end was the final signal before release. What was hidden to protect a false image is now collapsing under its own weight. The ones who stayed quiet will soon be forced to choose, confession or consequence. You are no longer the one carrying the burden, the truth is carrying them. Stay here, remain connected, because what unfolds next will prove that silence never wins forever, it only delays the inevitable. Amen. 1313. Now feel the air changing, because when a long-hidden truth reaches this stage, it begins to rearrange reality itself. You may sense it in sudden memories resurfacing, in emotions that rise without warning, in moments where your heart whispers, "So that's why." The crying without end was your spirit refusing to accept a false story. What they dismissed as time passing was actually pressure building. Every secret has a breaking point, and this one is dangerously close. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen. 1414. Let this settle deeply. The most painful realization will not be what they hid, but how long they watched you struggle while knowing the answer. They saw your confusion. They heard your questions. They noticed your silence growing heavier. Yet they chose comfort over courage, routine over responsibility. That decision shaped your emotional world in ways they never imagined you would survive. But you did survive. And that survival is exactly why the truth can no longer remain buried. Strength has a way of calling truth forward. Amen. 1515. This is where power returns to you, because once the truth steps into the light, the story is no longer controlled by those who hid it. The crying begins to lose its grip, clarity replaces confusion, and understanding starts healing what silence broke. You are no longer waiting for answers, they are moving toward you. Stay grounded, stay aware, because the next part will reveal what happens when the truth finally meets your strength face to face. Amen. 1616. Now the truth starts breathing on its own, because once silence cracks, it no longer needs permission to grow. You may feel an unusual calm mixed with tension, like standing before a door you were never meant to open. This is the moment where patterns align. Old arguments suddenly make sense, unfair blame reveals its source, and the crying without end transforms into a sharp awareness. What was hidden did not disappear, it waited for your strength to catch up. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen. 1717. Understand the shift taking place. The family narrative you were given was carefully edited, leaving out one crucial chapter that explains everything. They rehearsed the version you heard, repeated it until it sounded real, and hoped time would erase the rest. But time does not erase truth, it preserves it. The weight you carried was never yours to hold, and the moment you realize this, the burden transfers back to where it belongs. This is not revenge, it is balance restoring itself. Amen. 1818. This is the line you cross, from questioning yourself to trusting your clarity. The tears that once felt endless now serve as proof that you were awake while others slept inside denial. The truth is approaching you with intention, not to break you, but to return what was taken, your understanding, your voice, your peace. Stay here, stay steady, because the next part will reveal how the first confession begins, and why it changes everything forever. Amen. 1919. Now the silence breaks its own rules. Because the first confession never arrives as a dramatic announcement, it slips out in hesitation, in a trembling pause, in a sentence that was never meant to be finished. Someone speaks too much, or too little. Someone corrects a story that never needed correction. And in that small crack, the entire truth begins to breathe. This is the moment your heart recognizes familiarity, not pain, but confirmation. You were not wrong. You were never wrong. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen 2020. Listen to what is really being said, because confessions rarely come clean at first. They come wrapped in excuses, softened words, and half-truths meant to test how much you already know. They will say, "We did what we thought was best," or "You wouldn't have understood back then." But beneath those words is fear, the fear of facing the cost of their silence. The crying without end was the price you paid for their delay, and now that price is being returned to its source. Amen 2121. This is where clarity becomes unshakable, because once one piece of truth surfaces, the rest can no longer hide. Memories align, timelines straighten, and your inner voice grows calm instead of loud. The tears begin to lose their power, not because the truth hurts less, but because it finally makes sense. Stay present in this moment, because the next part will reveal how the truth expands once the first confession escapes, and why there is no way back to silence again. Amen 2222. Now watch the truth gain momentum, because once it escapes, it refuses to move slowly. What began as a single slip of words starts pulling other voices into the light. One memory unlocks another, one name leads to another, and suddenly the story they protected for years begins rewriting itself without permission. You may notice hesitation turning into defensiveness, calm turning into urgency. This is not anger, it is exposure. The crying without end was the warning before this acceleration. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen 2323. Feel the internal shift, because the truth does something powerful inside you before it changes anything outside. The self-blame loosens its grip. The confusion that haunted you for years starts dissolving. You realize that your sensitivity was not a flaw, it was awareness. While others agreed to forget, you remembered through feeling. And now, as fragments of the real story align, you are no longer searching for answers. They are arriving on their own. Amen 2424. This is the irreversible point, because once truth reaches this stage, silence can no longer repair itself. The family dynamic begins transforming, roles quietly collapse, and those who once controlled the narrative start reacting instead of leading. You are no longer behind the story, you are standing in front of it with clarity. Remain here, remain grounded, because the next part will reveal the final layer of the secret. And why it was the most protected of all. Amen 2525. Now the deepest layer begins to surface, because every secret has a core, and this one was guarded with fear, not love. The earlier truths were only the outer walls. What rises now is the reason everything was hidden in the first place. A decision was made that altered your direction, redirected opportunities, and quietly shaped the life you were forced to live instead of the one you were meant to have. This is why the crying never truly stopped. Your spirit knew something essential had been taken away. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen 2626. Understand what was truly protected. It was not family unity, not peace, not even you. It was a mistake that someone could not undo, a choice that exposed selfishness, fear, and avoidance. Admitting it would have meant accepting responsibility for years of your confusion and pain. So they chose silence and hoped time would erase consequences. But time preserved them. The truth now emerging is not just information, it is accountability knocking at the door. Amen. 2727. This is where transformation becomes unavoidable, because once the core truth is revealed, the past reorganizes itself in your mind. Suddenly, moments that never made sense lock into place. You stop asking why you were different and start seeing how you were diverted. The tears that once drained you now feel like a release instead of a wound. Stay steady, because the next part will reveal what happens when responsibility can no longer be avoided, and how your freedom begins at that exact moment. Amen. 2828. Now accountability steps into the room, because truth without responsibility cannot stay quiet for long. The atmosphere changes when the final realization lands: the pain you carried belonged to someone else all along. Faces that once looked certain now hesitate. Words that once controlled the narrative lose their power. This is the moment where excuses begin to sound hollow, and the weight of what was done finally becomes real to those who avoided it. The crying without end was never your burden, it was the echo of their unresolved choices. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen. 2929. Absorb this carefully, because responsibility does not always come with apology at first, it comes with discomfort. You may notice deflection, sudden emotional reactions, or attempts to soften the truth. This is not denial. It is the struggle of facing consequences delayed for too long. But the truth no longer needs agreement to exist. It stands on its own, and in doing so, it releases you from the false identity you were forced to carry. The story is changing sides now. Amen. 3030. This is where freedom quietly begins, not with celebration, but with clarity. The endless crying loses its grip because understanding replaces confusion. You no longer need to prove your pain. It has already been validated by the truth itself. What comes next is not about them, it is about you stepping forward unburdened. Stay present, because the next part will reveal how healing starts once responsibility can no longer be denied. Amen. 3131. Now healing enters without permission, because once truth and accountability collide, healing does not ask whether anyone is ready. It simply begins. You may feel a strange mix of relief and sadness, as if something heavy has finally been set down after being carried for years. This is not weakness, this is release. The crying without end starts changing its meaning, it is no longer confusion, it is closure forming in real time. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen. 3232. Understand this stage deeply. Healing does not mean forgetting what was hidden, and it does not mean excusing what was done. It means reclaiming the parts of yourself that were buried under silence. The truth allows you to see yourself clearly for the first time, without inherited blame or distorted stories. You realize that the pain shaped you, but it did not define you. The moment you stop carrying their secret, your strength becomes visible even to yourself. Amen. 3333. This is the quiet victory, because the most powerful transformation does not shout. It settles. Your breath deepens, your thoughts slow, and the endless crying finally finds its end, not because the past disappears, but because it no longer controls you. Stay with this awareness, because the next part will reveal how your new clarity reshapes every relationship moving forward. Amen. 3434. Now relationships begin to realign, because truth changes how you stand, speak, and see. The dynamics that once made you feel small start shifting without effort. Some people grow quiet. Some step closer. Some struggle to recognize the version of you that no longer carries unearned guilt. This is not distance created by anger, it is space created by clarity. The crying without end has done its work. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen. 3535. Let this truth settle. Not everyone will know how to meet you at this level of awareness. Some relationships were built on your silence, and they will weaken when you find your voice. This is not loss, it is sorting. The truth does not destroy real bonds. It reveals which ones were real to begin with. You are no longer reacting from wounds, but responding from understanding, and that changes every interaction without you saying a word. Amen. 3636. This is the new foundation, where you choose connection without self-betrayal. The endless crying fades because you are no longer fighting an invisible enemy. You see clearly now, and clarity is peace in motion. Stay present, because the final part will reveal what life looks like when truth is no longer hidden, and how your future finally opens. Amen. 3737. Now the future finally steps forward, because when truth is no longer hidden, life stops looping the same pain. You begin to notice new decisions forming naturally, without fear, without hesitation. The weight that once slowed every step is gone, and in its place is a quiet confidence you never had permission to feel before. The crying without end has completed its purpose, it cleared the path so you could walk it freely. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen. 3838. Understand what has truly changed. You are no longer living inside someone else's unfinished story. The past has been acknowledged, the silence has been broken, and the false version of you has dissolved. What remains is clarity, strong, calm, unshaken. You do not need validation from those who hid the truth itself has already restored your dignity. From this point forward, every choice you make carries intention instead of survival. Amen. 3939. This is the closing of one chapter and the opening of another, not with noise, not with drama, but with certainty. The tears that once defined your nights no longer own your future. You stand grounded, aware, and whole, knowing that what was hidden could not destroy you, it revealed you. Stay steady in this truth, because this is where your real life begins. Amen. 4040. Now the circle completes itself, because every truth, once revealed, returns power to where it always belonged. You may look back at the version of yourself who cried without end and finally understand their strength. Those tears were not signs of breaking, they were signals of endurance. You survived confusion, silence, and misdirection, and you are standing here with awareness that cannot be taken from you. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen. 4141. Let this final realization settle. Forgiveness, if it comes, will come on your terms, not as an obligation. Healing does not require approval from those who stayed silent. It requires honesty with yourself, and you have already done that work. The truth has rewritten your story, not to trap you in the past, but to free you from it. What was hidden no longer controls you, and what was lost no longer defines you. Amen. 4242. This is the quiet ending and the powerful beginning. The crying without end has found its conclusion, not because the past vanished, but because you rose above it. You move forward with clarity, strength, and peace, carrying wisdom instead of wounds. The truth did not break you, it revealed who you always were. Amen. 4343. Now integration begins, because after truth, after healing, after clarity, comes alignment. Your mind, heart, and spirit start moving in the same direction for the first time. You no longer second-guess your feelings or question your memories. What once felt fragmented now feels whole. The crying without end fades into the background as wisdom, because every tear taught you how to recognize truth even when it was hidden. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen. 4444. Understand this final strength. You do not need closure from anyone else. Closure has already happened inside you. The silence that once controlled your emotions has lost its authority. You can stand in the same rooms, hear the same voices, and feel no confusion, only awareness. This is not emotional distance. This is emotional maturity born from truth. What once weakened you has now refined you. Amen. 4545. This is where peace becomes permanent, not loud, not dramatic, but steady and unshakable. You carry the past as understanding, not as weight. The story that began with endless crying ends with quiet power. You are no longer defined by what was hidden from you, but by what was revealed within you. And this is how the truth completes its work. Amen. 4646. Now the truth settles into your identity. Because what you have learned no longer lives outside you, it becomes part of how you walk, choose, and breathe. You no longer rush explanations, you no longer chase understanding from those who withheld it. The crying without end has transformed into discernment. You recognize peace not as silence, but as alignment. This is the moment where your presence alone reflects the truth you survived. Something huge is waiting for you. Amen. 4747. Hold this awareness gently. You may notice that life responds differently now. Opportunities feel cleaner, conversations feel lighter, and decisions feel clear without struggle. This is not coincidence, it is the result of carrying nothing that was never yours. The secret that once weighed you down no longer has a place to hide. You are not reacting anymore, you are choosing. And choice, rooted in truth, is freedom in motion. Amen. 4848. This is the lasting transformation. Where peace is no longer temporary and strength no longer needs to prove itself. The endless crying has completed its journey, leaving behind wisdom, boundaries, and calm certainty. You stand whole, aware, and grounded, knowing that truth did not arrive to hurt you, it arrived to return you to yourself. Amen. 4949